When I was in high school, my grammar and literature teacher was always trying to give us a wide variety of literary genres and stories to read. My sophomore year of high school, I remember seeing her scratching out some words in a few copies of this novel with guns on it. Even with those swear words properly inked out, Mrs. Barr started a fascination that I've carried until this day. That book was The Untouchables by Eliot Ness and Oscar Fraley. And it opened up a fascination of mine for everything regarding the Mafia. I love video games that explore certain parts of history. It's why I love the Assassin's Creed games so much, even though each of the individual games are varying quality. I played most of the Mafia-inspired games. My first one was Godfather the Black Hand Edition on the Wii, and of course I played Godfather 2 and Mafia 2 on the Xbox 360, along with Mafia 3 on the Xbox One. However, Mafia 1 looked really rough in its original form, and I've never had the desire to go back and play it. So when they announced a complete shot-for-shot, feature-for-feature remake of the game in 4K with what I consider to be gorgeous graphics, I was immediately interested in filling a gap for my video game Mafia history. Once it was on sale, I definitely picked it up. Does this classic gangster story from the history of gaming hold up? How's the gunplay? The gameplay? Normally I cover RPGs on this channel, but once in a while, you just gotta take a little bit of a side quest, you know? Here's my full review of Mafia Definitive Edition for the Xbox One. Personally, I love that this game's focus is on the narrative. Mafia Definitive Edition isn't trying to be like Grand Theft Auto or San Andreas. It's a period piece, so you're not going to find repetitious missions or anything really in the way of side quests. There are collectibles to find in the missions and a free roam option that lets you run around the city of Lost Haven and hijack all sorts of types of cars and bring them back to your garage. There are some fun completion tasks, things to do and find out in the world, but it won't take long. There's no experience system. There's no level up system. You're just a guy in the Mafia trying to make the best of it. One of the biggest complaints that I think most people will have about the game is the simulation nature of the driving. And because you do so much driving, let's start there. The sounds, movements, and most importantly, the speed and speed limit play an important part of this game. You're not going to be racing from place to place all of the time unless you want the cops to chase you. In fact, the back or select button sets a throttle so you can only go the speed limit, much as was common back in the day. This makes driving feel a little bit like a chore, but honestly, I kind of liked it. Observing the rainy streets of New Haven and listening to a fictional news update or a sports broadcast really set the tone for the game. Made it feel real and lived in, particularly with the music at the time. However, there are times where outrunning the police to get from place to place was fun as well, particularly when you gained access to fast and faster cars. You know how I said this is a period piece? Well, the cars from this period may have looked cool, but they are a piece of junk to drive sometimes. If you're stuck in a rickety old truck trying to outrun the police, it can be a bit of a challenge. Good luck. Still, the vehicles and the systems behind it are interesting and honestly add, in my opinion, to the charm of the game. You could get frustrated by it, but I honestly think it helps you better understand what these guys trying to smuggle beer in an old truck were up against. This game allows you to drive and collect a variety of vehicles from the era, and if you're a classic car enthusiast, you're definitely going to enjoy how shiny and new they look in the game. The gunplay and combat, on the other hand, isn't anything to get too excited about. It's serviceable. I tend to leave games on the normal difficulty and aiming settings when I play them, particularly for a review, but I had to turn up the speed so I could move the reticle around faster. It was far too slow and didn't allow me to be reflexive at all. Mafia Definitive Edition gives you access to shotguns, the classic Thompson or Tommy gun, and a variety of handguns. Honestly, I pretty much just use a handgun. Getting in close with a handgun and lining up the enemy's head in the middle of the pistol reticle, which is a circle, is the best way to get through combat with a simple headshot. Yes, you have access to Molotov cocktails and grenades from time to time, But simple flanking, stealth, and headshots are the best way to get through the game. The recoil or slow loading makes the other weapons not as fun to play. Speaking of stealth, it really is your best friend when you can use it. Sneaking through some of the larger set pieces that don't require you to combat waves and waves of enemies makes for an easier experience overall, and it feels more realistic. The gameplay is simple. It's there to help you experience a story in a world torn apart by the Great Depression and mankind's reaction to the Prohibition era. On one hand, if you're looking for a ton of replay value, you're not going to find it here. On the other hand, if you're looking for an interesting story about the Mafia, you'll definitely find it in Mafia Definitive Edition. The Godfather games are the video game retelling of the movies I've never actually seen. But Mafia tells its own story with unique characters in the city of Lost Haven. Right away, one of the things I love about Mafia Definitive Edition is that it doesn't glorify the mobster experience. It's very clear from the beginning that this criminal underworld is dangerous and getting sucked into it is not good for anyone. The game starts you out as Thomas Angelo, a cabbie in Lost Haven trying to just make a few cents to get by. Through a series of very unfortunate events, he finds himself seeking revenge and using one of the local dons and his men to find it. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and when Thomas has a taste of the strength of working inside this criminal organization, along with a nice payday, he's hooked in. Tommy, along with his friends, Polly and Sam, get roped in by the Don schemes to fight back against the rival family. Throughout the story, you're going to experience some interesting set pieces that really give you an idea of the tone of this world and what people in the 1920s and 30s were experiencing. And honestly, it's a lot of fun to play through. The game isn't long, taking me around 10 hours to complete. Each of the chapters or missions might take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour to wrap up. The story is brought to life by some excellent voice acting and visuals. The Italian mobster mixed with that classic New York accent or an Irish accent makes for a really fun time. I think the voice acting is one of the key parts of this game. The characterization of these criminals, even though yes, they are criminals, helps you really connect with who they are and what they're about and what they're trying to accomplish in their lives, even if it is crime. This game does not pull punches in showing the turmoil of killing for a living and the dangers of this job. From a heavy reliance on alcohol to taking advantage of the girls at the local brothel, these men are coping with the intensity of their lives in very unhealthy ways. The way Mafia Definitive Edition explores the different themes and story elements is touching and powerful, even though you fully recognize that these men really understand that, yes, they're kind of in the wrong, but they keep going ahead anyway, trying to live their lives anyway, running from the cops anyway, running from rival families anyway, running from the border patrol anyway. They just keep pushing, even though they know it's crime. It's an interesting insight to their worldview. One thing I want to point out is that this isn't an open world game. While Lost Haven has some places to explore, and really the city is gorgeous, it feels very alive and very lived in, you're really just moving from point A to point B to see the progress. If you've played any of the newer Mafia games, it's very similar to those. In the missions, you'll collect a few comics and magazines, but you're not going to go too far out of your way to find them. You're not coming to this game to explore amazing gunplay. You're coming to this game to explore a slice of American history inside a beautifully remade world with unique characters, fun missions, and a story that honestly had me hooked. Thanks so much for watching. If you're into great games with awesome stories, then I would encourage you to check out one of my reviews that's right here. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you again next time.